Thank you all for making your introductions. That's great. And I think just in the interest of time, I do see that the waiting room is still pretty active, but I think we'll go ahead and get started and just let those folks continue to trickle in as they are able. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this afternoon for our community activism training webinar. You will be hearing from a handful of really incredible individuals who can help us all better prepare to protect our democracy, whether that be at the No Kings Day rally or another kind of event or movement. So we will get into brief introductions in just a moment, but first I would like to walk us through today's training agenda. Okay, so after those brief introductions, I'll talk about VPIRG's new Democracy Summer campaign and how to tap into that. From there, Jerry Peterson from 5051 Vermont will tell us all about the No Kings Day rally coming up on June 14th and how we can all prepare and participate in that effort. Then Falco Schilling of ACLU of Vermont will discuss legal protest rights, Anna Suberling of VPIRG will touch on safety and de-escalation strategies. Representative Esme Cole will tell us how we can all continue to hold local and federal leaders accountable during this time. And I will close this out with a few upcoming events and actions that we can all take. So I know that is a lot for one webinar, and we only have an hour, but I am so confident that you will all get a lot out of this. So with that, let's keep it moving with some introductions. Okay, so for those who don't know, my name is Jordan Hayden. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm VPIRG's Democracy Summer Campaign Director. I have been with VPIRG now for 3.5 years, initially managing the Keep Vermont Cool Climate Action campaign, organizing efforts both in and out of the State House. So now I am pivoting to our next exciting effort, which I'll tell you all about very briefly in a moment. But for now, I will pass it over to my friend and VPIRG colleague, Anna Suberling.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna. I also use she, her pronouns. I am the environmental advocate with VPIRG, and I've been on the full-time staff since 2023, but knocking on doors for the past 4 summers. So great to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. Next, I am so pleased to introduce Jerry Peterson from 5051 Vermont.
Yeah, I'm Jerry Peterson, she, her pronouns. I'm one of the lead organizers and state representative for Vermont of 50501, and I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you, Jerry. Next, I will pass it over to Falco Schilling from ACLU of Vermont.
Hi, everyone. I'm Falco Schilling. I'm the Advocacy Director at the ACLU of Vermont, which means I oversee our legislative and administrative advocacy work as well as our community engagement.
Thank you, thank you. And last but certainly not least, Representative Esme Cole.
Hello, everyone. Great to be with you today. I'm Esme. I am a House member in the Vermont House of Representatives, and I have served, I'm on my second term, and I serve on the Committee on Human Services and previously served on the Committee on Agriculture, Food Resiliency, and Forestry. And I've had the pleasure of having the lobbyist sort of influence of many of these folks here on the screen. But I'm really excited to be here with you and tell you what's worked for me in being held accountable.
Thank you, Representative Cole. And again, to all of our guest speakers, so appreciate you being here today. So real quick, I would love to tell you a little bit about VPIRG's newest campaign, Democracy Summer. Our goal, as you can see here on this slide, is to mobilize thousands of Vermonters all around the state to take action to protect and strengthen our democracy. We will do this by knocking on doors, collecting signatures, organizing events, and training leaders throughout the summer and this fall. We're doing this because we know that it takes roughly 3.5% of a population to make real political change. And in Vermont, that is just about 22,000 people. So by working together and in coalition with many other organizations, like the ones on this call, we believe that we can stand up against the devastating decisions coming from the White House and inspire both local and national change. So to stay up to date on all that we have planned, you can follow at VPIRG on social media and visit democracysummervt.org, which you can also visit by scanning the QR code on your screen with your phone. Then you'll have access to all of our latest podcast episodes, events, and action opportunities. So I'll leave it there for right now, but if you have questions or you want to get more involved, you can always email me at jhayden@vpirg.org. And again, you'll get all of this in a follow-up email. So with that, I am so pleased to pass the mic over to Jerry Peterson to talk more about the upcoming No Kings Day rally. Jerry, the floor is yours.
Great. So let's talk about 50501 or 5051. So 5051 is not an isn't an institution. It's a people-powered response to the growing authoritarianism in the United States. It's all of us. And our demands are simple. We want constitutional accountability. We want limits on executive power, and we want the removal of unelected billionaires from political influence. And we will continue holding nationwide protests until these demands are met. It's something that started up in February, just some random guy from the internet who said, hey, we should all get together and protest all the time. And we've just kept on doing it. Next slide. 50501 is intentionally leaderless. It's not a weakness. This is our strength. We exist to connect, not control. So, there are a lot of great, organizations like VPIRG, like ACLU. These are all great ways to engage and, connect. And this is our strength. We are diverse by design. We include everyone from rural conservatives to urban progressives, from former Trump voters to lifelong activists. The only thing that we require is to participate in the movement is a commitment to the shared cause. And what this means is that, there's a diversity of beliefs. We have people who are very passionate about like LGBTQ rights. They have people passionate about, Palestine, but we're all coming together and agreeing that this is something that we all believe in, working together to, restore essentially our democracy. Next slide. So our next big National Day of Action is on June 14th. It's Flag Day and also Trump's birthday. There's hundreds of nationwide events, and you could find details about the events on nokings.org. Here in Vermont, there are two biggish things going on. There is a convoy being organized principally by indivisible chapters. It's happening along Route 7, going from Williamstown, Massachusetts, all the way up to Swanton. And that's going on basically all day, starting at the very beginning of the morning, and it's ending at like 5 o'clock. So towns along that route, all be having like honkin' waves and, speakers along the way. And just about in the midway point of that convoy, in Burlington, we have the main event, which I've been spending all of my free time working on. In Waterfront Park, it's happening from noon to 4. We have a few dozen performers and speakers. We've got Alison Bechdel, we got Mohsen Madawi, the Palestinian activist who was recently detained and then released. It'll be his first public appearance since his release. We're all excited to hear him speak. Performances by Miriam Bernardo and others. It should be a really good time, and I really hope to see you all there. Next slide. So how can you get involved? First of all, you can go to our website, 50501vermont.com. There you'll find details about, all of our events, as well as a link to volunteer at the event on June 14th, as well as any other events that we host or co-sponsor across the state. Like actually, there's one going on tomorrow in White River Junction. We could use more volunteers down there if you're available. There's also 50501 National. Literally tens of thousands of people on this Discord that are all collaborating on, putting out media, doing alerts, phone banking, basically anything you can think of. And they're all like, figuring out some way to like, work together in different guilds to make it all happen. And 50501 is kind of like a nexus for lots of different organizations. We partner with now General Strike. We partner with Backbone Coalition. We partner with like lots of different organizations, but they all meet up at 50501, which kind of acts as like a glue for lots of different progressive organizations in the United States. And if you can't find what you need, contact me on Signal and I'll hook you up. Um, that's it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jerry, for sharing this information and for all of the work that you have been doing. I can totally attest to Jerry's free time being completely devoted to this upcoming rally. So I know it's going to be great. And just echoing, I really hope to see you all there. So again, thank you so much, Jerry. And I will pass it over now to Falco Schilling.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk to folks. As I said before, my name is Falco Schilling, and I'm the Advocacy Director at the ACLU of Vermont. And I'm going to speak quickly today about some of your rights when you're getting ready to go out and protest. So this is a little bit of a primer, so you know what your rights are before you get out in the streets. And then I know some of the other presenters are going to be following up with some really helpful information around de-escalation and other tools and tactics to use. So next slide. So I think, as most folks know, the First Amendment protects your right to assemble and express your views through protest. However, police and other government officials are allowed to put certain restrictions on the exercise of free speech, depending on where you are doing it and some other factors. So make sure that you're prepared by brushing up on your rights before heading out into the streets. Next slide. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about where you're protesting and how that can impact the rights that you have. So on public property, your rights are the strongest when you're in what's known as traditional public forums. These are streets, sidewalks, parks, places like that. And you likely have the right to speak out on other public properties like plazas in front of government buildings, as long as you're not blocking access to the government building or interfering with other purposes the property was designed for. You don't need a permit to march in the streets or on sidewalks, as long as marchers don't obstruct car or pedestrian traffic. And if you don't have a permit, police officers can't ask you to move to the side of the street or sidewalk to let others safely pass. Next slide. When it comes to private property owners can set rules for speech on their own property. At the same time, government cannot restrict your speech if it's taking place on your own property or with the consent of the property owner. So good things to know about when you're thinking about where you're protesting, and also really appreciative of the organizers who are going to be helping make sure that all the rules are followed as folks are assembling on public property throughout the state as we engage in these rallies. So next slide. So one thing to know is that counter-protesters also have free speech rights. I don't know about any planned counter-protests for these rallies, but it's always good to know that they have a right to speak as well, and that police must treat protesters and counter-protesters equally. The police are permitted to keep antagonistic groups separated, but should allow them to be within sight of each other and sound of each other so that folks can fully express their views. If the police were unlawfully separating groups with opposing viewpoints to the point where they couldn't express their speech, that would be infringement of their First Amendment rights. And as we think about counter-protesters, I'm really excited that we have our next segment coming up, which can help talk about de-escalation tactics and other things like that if you are encountering hostile folks while you're out exercising your First Amendment rights. Next slide. One thing that we often get questions about is the rights to document protests. So when you're lawfully present in any public space, you have the right to photograph anything in plain view, including federal buildings and the police. On private property, the owners may set rules related to the photography and videos. And one thing to know is that police officers may not confiscate or demand to view your photographs or video without a warrant. These are your private property, and you have protections under the Fourth Amendment. Nor may they delete data under any circumstances. However, they may order citizens to cease activities that are truly interfering with legitimate law enforcement operations, such as physically impeding officers as they're trying to do their jobs, things like that. Next slide. So we have questions folks that have asked, and we've seen this happen, where folks might be stopped or detained by police officers while trying to document a protest. And the advice we give in these situations is pretty similar to the advice we give in any situation when you're encountering law enforcement in these types of environments, which I'll get into a little bit more. But first, always remain calm and never physically resist a police officer. Police cannot detain you without reasonable suspicion that you have or are about to commit a crime, or if you're in the process of doing so. So if you're stopped, ask the officer if you're free to leave. That's the first thing to do. If the answer is yes, calmly walk away. If you are detained and they do not let you walk away, ask the officer, what crime are you suspected of committing? And remind the officer that taking photographs is your right under the First Amendment and does not constitute reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about when things might go wrong and what you should know in those situations. So if there's an order to disperse a protest, you should know that shutting down a protest through the dispersal order must be a law enforcement's last resort. Police cannot break up a gathering unless there's a clear and present danger of a riot, disorder, interference with traffic, or other immediate threat to public safety. They cannot be broken up just because of the message of the speech or anything else like that. It has to be posing a clear and present danger to public safety. If officers issue a dispersal order, they must provide a reasonable opportunity to comply, including sufficient time to clear and an unobstructed exit path. And you must receive clear and detailed notice in this dispersal order, including how much time you have to disperse, the consequences of failing to disperse, and a clear way to exit before anyone can be arrested for any crime, including disorderly conduct or anything along those lines. Next slide, please. So now, similar to the question before, what if you were stopped for police, this time not for filming the content, but for any other activity? And once again, stay calm, make sure your hands are visible, don't argue, resist, or obstruct the police, even if you believe they're violating your rights. Point out that you're not disrupting anyone else's activity and that the First Amendment protects your actions. Once again, ask if you're free to leave. If the officer says yes, calmly walk away. If you're under arrest, you have a right to ask why. Otherwise, say you wish to remain silent, ask for a lawyer immediately. Do not say anything or sign anything without a lawyer. They may continue to ask questions. Continue to assert your right to remain silent and ask for a lawyer. It's one of those that's the one piece of advice we continue to have. If you are under arrest, assert your right to remain silent and ask for an attorney. Next slide, please. And this is one thing, if you are concerned about law enforcement interactions or the possibility of arrest, always good to make sure you have contact information on you, including contact information for emergency contacts, or if you have an attorney that you might like to be in contact with, know those numbers, have them available. And you have a right to make a local phone call. And if you're calling a lawyer, police do not have the right to listen. You never have to consent to a search of yourself or your belongings. If you do explicitly consent, it can affect you later in court. Because if you assert your Fourth Amendment rights and require a warrant for a search, those rights can be waived by giving people the right to search you. Police may pat down your clothing if they suspect you have a weapon, or may search you after an arrest. Police officers may not confiscate or demand to view your photographs or video without a warrant, nor may they delete data under any circumstances. However, they may order citizens to cease activities that are truly interfering with legitimate law enforcement operations. Next slide. And I guess one other piece of advice that I've heard from folks before attending protests, if you're concerned about law enforcement accessing your personal electronic devices, change your login from a biometric one to a passcode. It is easier for law enforcement to force access if you are using either a Face ID or a fingerprint ID, and you have more protections if you have a passcode. They cannot force you to give that up. So that's a piece of advice I've heard at other protests and wanted to share that with you as well. And now the question comes up, what to do if your rights have been violated? Well, when you can, write down everything you remember, including officers' badge numbers, patrol car numbers, and the agency they work for. Get contact information for witnesses. Take photographs of any injuries. And then once you have all this information, you can file a written complaint with the agency's Internal Affairs Division or excuse me, civilian control board or complaint board. So those, next slide, please. Excuse me, sorry for that. So I really appreciate you all taking a minute to listen to me. And if you want to learn more, you can get information about your rights when it comes to protest and your rights in many other situations at aclu.org/knowyourrights. We have lots of different pieces of information there, ranging from immigration interactions, all other police interactions, basically anything else you might like to know. And stay safe out there. And I hope you have a good time exercising your First Amendment rights.
Thank you so much, Falco. That was so helpful. And just as a reminder to everybody here, you will be receiving all of these materials in a follow-up email likely this afternoon. So you will have access to all of this. And thank you again. All right, passing it over now to Anna Suberling to talk safety and de-escalation.
Great. Thanks so much, Jordan. Hi, everyone. Like Jordan said, my name is Anna, and I'm the environmental advocate here with VPIRG. But when I'm not lobbying in the State House, I work closely with our canvas operation going door to door all across Vermont, and I've had 4 years of experience doing so. So I'm really happy to share some of my personal experience with folks that are a little bit agitated and oppositional, and also share some resources with you all as well. So the first thing to know and understand about de-escalation is the goal. The goal of de-escalation is to reduce tension and not to win an argument. When we interact and encounter someone that's really upset and maybe their behavior is a little unpredictable, we don't want to go into debate mode, which could potentially escalate the situation, but rather diffuse the tension and keep everyone calm in order to keep everyone safe. Next slide, please. So when we encounter someone that is agitated, irate, etc., we want to address and evaluate this situation. First, I would suggest asking yourself, am I the right person to be de-escalating right now? Do I have a clear state of mind? And am I calm? Sometimes the issue that the person that you're in dialogue with is really personal to you. And so emotions are involved and you may not be the person to de-escalate. So then I would suggest tapping a friend or a colleague to handle the situation. Next, you want to make sure that the situation is not risking your safety. If the person is very aggressive or displaying violent or what could be violent behavior, remove yourself from the situation and tap somebody else who might be more equipped to deal with this, like an event organizer might be a good example. And once you've asked yourself those 2 questions, evaluating if the person that comes up to you is capable of having a productive conversation. Do they show signs that they're willing to listen and engage in a productive conversation? Or if they are very aggressive, very irate, it may influence how you approach the conversation, and I'll get into the nuance of that in a bit. Next slide, please. In either situation, your best tool for de-escalation is active listening. A lot of times that when people are upset, they just want to be heard. They want to feel like they're not yelling into the void and that someone is listening to them, and engaging with someone that is really upset and talking to them for a few minutes can be enough to calm them down. So how do we make people feel heard? A lot of it comes from body language, the easy ones like nodding along and kind of, listening and repeating back what they have to say. Even sometimes I've read that crossing your arms can feel not as open as having your arms by your side. It kind of shows that you're like closed off. So considering all of those things when you're actively listening. Secondly, using key phrases to show that they're being heard. Sometimes it can be as simple as, I hear you, or yeah, thanks for sharing. I really hear that. Can make people feel like they're being heard. And then finally, as we're actively listening, we want to try and find their exact concern with what they're saying so that we can use that to connect and move the conversation along and really find those common values. So next slide, please. And so we're actively listening for those shared values that we can have a conversation about, and we really want to connect. I'll go ahead and give an example. Let's say, you and a neighbor are talking and you're upset, or you're like concerned about, rightfully so, the state of the world. And for example, the EPA, backsliding on environmental regulations, and your neighbor, is agitated and says, "Oh, I'm so glad they're gutting all these programs. This is a great thing. The taxpayer is going to save so much money." You're actively listening and you hear their exact concern, their emotional root. They're concerned about their checkbook. They're concerned about their finances. And so I feel like most people can say, yeah, I kind of, to some extent, care about that too. And you found a shared value that you can connect over and help to de-escalate the situation because it doesn't feel like you're conflicting as much anymore. So for example, in that situation that I just give, I might say, yeah, I totally hear you. No one wants to spend more money than they have to. And there you've connected over that value. I could say, I don't want to, spend more money. Times are tough right now. And then move forward. You can move on to something that's a little bit further removed. Like, gosh, I was just at the grocery store. It was so, so expensive. And move on to something that doesn't feel as immediate as what you were talking about previously. And should you choose to continue that conversation, something that I've carried with me for a while when talking to people that see the world a little bit differently is to lean into curiosity instead of judgment. And that way, when you're asking open-ended questions, you can find out more about how they view the world, and that really opens up opportunity to have a better dialogue. So I always carry that with me when talking to folks. Next slide, please. Now, I know conversations don't always go so splendidly, so sometimes we de-escalate to disengage with people. This is the type of conversation that I referenced before, that someone's being very aggressive and they're irate and their behavior is a bit unpredictable. This is when we want to try and immediately diffuse the anger and disengage. So again, active listening is still going to be your strongest tool. Folks like to be heard, and what we can do is acknowledge their feelings. In this situation, I think a good example is maybe you're tabling at a protest and a counter protester comes up to you and is upset. Something that you could say to acknowledge their feelings is say, "Hey, you seem very upset right now," or "I hear how angry and passionate you are about this." And sometimes naming that very directly in a calm but direct, assured tone is enough to calm them down and make them feel heard. And then secondly, asking opinions can also be a helpful tool. So following it up with saying, "Hey, I hear how upset you are right now. Is there something I can do for you?" And by asking that question, it's enough to have them consider that maybe their anger is a little bit misplaced right now. They say, "Oh, this person is tabling at an event and I'm very angry, yelling at them. My anger is misplaced." There is simply nothing that they can do to, fix the situation right now. So, making folks feel heard and engaging with them can help in a lot of these situations. And finally, if these tips don't feel like they're working, I love a distraction method, saying, wow, hi, hello, my name's Anna. Nice to meet you. I love your shirt. Where'd you get it? Completely switching the dialogue can also be an effective tool, or finding an intervener or a bystander. Next slide, please. And so if you happen to be a bystander of someone that's being aggressive or harassing another, there are 4 Ds of intervening: distract, delegate, direct, and delay. The distraction tool is something that I mentioned before. Some examples of what you could say as a bystander. You're witnessing someone having a tough interaction. Walk up to the person that's being harassed and ask for the time. Ask for directions to somewhere. Say something unrelated to their more intense conversation to distract from the situation. Delegate, you could bring in a third party, maybe someone that has more perceived authority, so an event organizer or someone from another table even at the protest, bringing in more people to diffuse the situation. In some instances, if it feels safe and appropriate, you can be direct with the aggressor and say, can you stop your behavior? This is inappropriate. And sometimes that works too. And then finally, if you are not the person to immediately and in that moment intervene, the delay method is to check in with the person that, on the other side of it all. So asking how they're doing, if there's anything you can do for them, means a lot. And as you all know, this movement is all about community and looking out for one another. So this 4th step is really important for that. Next slide. Great. And I've included some of the links that help me pull this together. And of course, if you have any questions at all, I'm sure Jordan will send out my email. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. And yes, that is correct. You will get all of this in the follow-up email, and just really appreciate your time here, Anna, because I can think of so many scenarios where these tips are useful. Like, yes, absolutely the rally that's coming up, but in so many future situations as well. So hopefully that's helpful for you all as well. And now I would love to pass it over to Representative Esme Cole.
All right. Thank you, Jordan. And thank you to everyone who spoke before me. I have already learned quite a bit, which I will try to apply in future interactions. I don't have a slideshow for you. I'm going to try to speak from the heart a little bit as a conversation here, because my section is going to focus on accountability and what has worked for me. And I think what I've witnessed about what works for influencing other legislators as well. I will say this particular group is great at it. You've convinced me on several fronts, and I really appreciate all the work that you do in the State House, and most definitely outside of the State House. For example, gathering this group together, which I think if we were all in person together, we would be able to move mountains. And I think we will in each of our own separate communities and also collectively. So accountability. So I will start with, I've been thinking about this ever since Jordan invited me, and I think it's been very helpful to reflect, like, what is accountability and what does that look like? And it doesn't necessarily always mean, unfortunately, from the constituent side, getting what you want. But I think it means telling the elected official that you are paying attention. So how do we go about showing that? So communicating with your elected reps is and senators and everyone beyond is critical. And I'm going to walk through a couple different ways that you can do that. And I think you all are very, already well versed in the activism community. So about, how to contact your legislators and you could do snail mail, you could do email, of course. All of our email information is public. And I'll definitely highly recommend referring to the Vermont legislative website, which I can put the link in the chat, but I'm sure that many of you all are familiar with it as well. Each legislator has their own distinct page with their contact information. And there are different pros and cons to different methods of contacting your elected official in different ways. I want to go back though to the letting them know that you're paying attention piece and what that looks like. So in whatever form of communication you choose, there are a couple ways to show to your rep or otherwise that you're paying attention, such as you are aware of a certain vote that they took in the past, whether that's a vote on public record, such as, well, all the votes are on public record in theory, but on the floor that, sort of gets more recognition when a roll call is being taken. So in every state it's different, but in the state of Vermont, our votes are primarily only on record as yay or nay when a roll call is requested. And so those are very easily accessible. But we also take votes in committee on specific bills that we have jurisdiction over. And so those votes are more, verbal, and you kind of have to watch. And so this is the part where I think that is lesser known that you can have more of an influence, is by paying close attention to those committee videos. So in addition to the legislative website, we have a YouTube channel for every single committee, and even subcommittees and committees of conference. Everything we do, because of law, is public. And so sometimes when things aren't as easily accessible on the record, you'll have to navigate the timing of when an action item was discussed in committee and go to that corresponding time on YouTube within that committee to find something you're talking about. And these recordings are in real time as well. So if you go to the committee page and you see on the agenda, which is on the top of the committee page, if you see something listed on the agenda that you think is really important, that you want to pay attention to, you can go click on the YouTube channel, which is also linked on the top of the committee page, to find or to witness the discussion that the legislators are having. And it's, if you haven't yet done this before, it's really an interesting way to get a sense of the personalities of different individuals. We're all human for sure. And for better or for worse, it's really good to pay attention if you have the time, which I know is not always a given. A lot of us are working all the time and busy, and especially this particular group who I know is extremely engaged. But this is just sort of an insider tip. So once you've done that, so once you've, getting a sense of maybe the details that aren't, top headlines like, crisis, nobody's passing an education bill, Exhibit A, there's one we all know about, but something more specific. I think, writing to or calling the State House and saying that, I noticed this happened in committee and I noticed you in particular did this. I think that can actually be really quite effective. And what I'm talking about right now, I feel like there are a lot of negative connotations with like having, a hawk eye on your legislator, but it's also a great opportunity to build trust and a relationship, because you can use those same specific circumstances that you noticed to say thank you. Like, even if whether you disagree or agree with your legislator on a certain issue, if you can find opportunities to say, hey, I really appreciated when you did this very specific action, that meant a lot to me because here's why. It'll open the door for you in maybe future circumstances to say, hey, what the heck was going on here in this other situation where I really was not, this doesn't fly with me for whatever reason, and being, very specific as to why and how it affects you specifically. And whenever we do this, it does help to write which town you're from when you are a constituent of that person. I think, sometimes I receive letters and the signature doesn't contain what town a person is from. And to be totally honest with you, because legislators are many, unfortunately, very concerned with re-election, if you are not from that town, or if you don't specify that you're from the town that they have domain over, then sometimes they just won't respond. or pay attention. So it does carry a lot of weight to show that you are from their district. And if you're not, but an issue is very important to you, and you know a certain legislator has a lot of say on a particular issue that affects your district, this is like the ultimate activism strategy, which is not feasible for absolutely everyone, but connecting with folks in that district, reaching out to maybe specific organizations that might be affected, and say, hey, I'm not, this affects me too, but I know your voice might have a little more say because this elected representative is in your region. So that's important. Another thing I will add too is that in Vermont, as I think hopefully most of you all know, our role in the legislature is part-time in theory. I don't think it's actually part-time. Like we're there 6 months full-time in person, full-time plus, and then need to be on our game and responsive and paying attention and preparing bills for the upcoming deadline in January. We cannot submit full-length bills beyond the deadline in January. So really a lot of the work happens off session. But something I will say about that too is we don't get paid very well, and we're stretched pretty thin. So another piece of advice I have to develop a relationship and influence over your legislator, which has worked for me personally, is for organizing figures and groups such as, for example, the superintendent of a school, this specifically is the example I'm referring to host a forum with your legislators, because sometimes when that organizing effort is led by an outside group inviting the legislator to come, you're more likely to get that face-to-face interaction than waiting on your legislator to like host an event where you talk about a specific bill, especially because we don't get paid very well and we don't have much time like for that front end work to be done by another group that might have capacity. I think that can be really helpful to develop relationships and to really get them to speak honestly. Well, hopefully, I mean, you never know. You've seen all these town halls that are being publicized elsewhere. But I think it's extremely effective when it's about a very specific topic area as well. So the education forum that our awesome new superintendent organized, inviting all the legislators, we had a great turnout, and it was really great, I think, to start that discussion and start to build some trust. This also happened to me. The Workers Center is another group that they did the organizing effort, and they invited me to come have a conversation with them about their vision. And that was really, really helpful. So I know you all are very engaged in the community. So I just wanted to, share that as a piece of advice. I want to be cognizant of time and also just my scattered brain, venting here, but maybe I'll share a couple more things if time allows. Okay, thumbs up from Jordan. So I talked about, being tied to the district. I talked about paying attention and being, having that close eye with their access to YouTube in particular. Another factor here is, and it's time intensive, unfortunately, but being in the room when you can, if you have a specific tie to the issue. The State House is a public building. And it's more public, I think, even than some other state houses in the country. So there are ways to take advantage of that, even just sitting there and not saying a word, but introducing yourself in the beginning, saying, hey, this is where I'm from. This is a piece of advice that a lobbyist organization asked or told me when I asked them, hey, what do you think I should talk about here? And they said, encouraging people to be in the room and letting, it aligns with letting them know that you're paying attention. So, this happened a lot with the housing bill and the various subcommittees. We had several people with lived experience with homelessness in particular, in the room, and lobbyists as well, advocating on their behalf. Just sitting there, I think the legislators, what comes out of their mouth might be a little bit different than to not have those faces right in front of them, which is a really important thing. I will finish, I think, on another communication piece. which is, weighing the cost benefit of time versus energy when it comes to communicating with your elected officials. And I will say there is absolutely benefit and something to say for the sheer amount of volume that a legislator receives on a specific topic. So if you receive 100 emails, on education or something else with a very specific ask, that's great. Oftentimes those 100 emails are saying the exact same thing because it's a copy and paste situation. So, I'm not discounting the impact of that whatsoever. A lot of reps cite the sheer number of emails in their floor reports, which is important. So it's important, and especially if you don't have as much time, using those copy and paste formats is great and okay, especially if you cite where you're from and your district at the bottom. However, there's also something to say for that little extra step of energy where you invest a little bit more time in the content of what you're saying. And, showing that your stuff beyond what you've seen in the headlines, just like I said, the crisis and sort of knee-jerk reaction to whatever is being said in the media is I think it's pretty powerful. So maybe going into a little bit more detail about the issue you're discussing. And email, I think, is a very time-efficient way to communicate your concerns. But I will say, I think the written letter, the power of that has not gone away. I really appreciate when I can tell someone has taken thought and pencil and paper to write to me. And we all have the same physical address, which is listed on our webpage. But you of course, cite the name of the legislator, so it goes to them specifically in our mailbox. Same thing for phone calls. I think this sometimes impacts me more than email. You call the general state house number, and the sergeant of arms or their staff, they answer. And what you say on the other end of the phone is, "Hi, this is your name, and I'm from," you definitely want to say where you're from, "this person's district, and this message is for this legislator," and then state your message. And I do think that especially when it's not a generic sort of talking point, but it really is more personal and specific, I think that is powerful. And the sergeant of arms types out a little sheet of paper, and saying what the person said on the phone, and that is delivered to the legislator by page, which is the 8th graders who volunteer in the State House. And it's really, again, I think maybe because it's on a physical piece of paper, maybe that is part of the reason that it, shows that there was commitment there. Last points. I know I'm going on a lot, but I have so much faith in this group, and I know you're the most effective activists in Vermont. So I just I want to get it all out there. Plant the seed earlier the better. So as soon as something gets on your radar, go for it. Because Anna spoke a lot to the psychology of whomever you're speaking to, and the psychology of a person's decisions are made by the accumulation of information that they're exposed to. And some things have more impact than others, of course, but that accumulation piece starts somewhere. And so I think it has a lot of power, and I think you have more power than if something's on your radar later in the game to develop a legislator's opinion when something happens sooner rather than later. And you might at the same time want to communicate to the legislator that you recognize a bill as drafted is not the bill that will result in the end of the game. So you can say, I understand, this looks really scary right now. I noticed this bill is drafted to do this. I understand there's the opportunity to change things around or to not pass it. So, it would mean a lot to me to do that. I think I'll also say messaging on that piece, stay true to you and what matters to you, and speaking from personal experience is really important. But at the same time, here's where the psychology comes in, just as Anna sort of alluded to. Know your audience. So something that's really important to you, that particular legislator, based on their personality or life experience, that might not really resonate to them, which is, stinks, but it's the reality. And so try to anticipate, you know, maybe based on their past votes and the way they sort of present themselves, what might appeal to them. And in part of that, it might be subject matter, of course. And even if it's controversial, being like, hey, I know this underlying thing, like, you know, free speech is important to you, but like, hey, why are you, you know, speaking so poorly of Moses Madawi or something like that, for other reasons. So, you know, getting into that psychology of, you know, having hope that you can get to the same place, and, you know, that, you know, adding the thank you in there, and like, I really appreciate that you care about this. And then at the same time, so pairing it. And I really do think that's important in gaining trust there. I think I'll leave it at that with one little story. We've had a of caution, I suppose. There's a group of legislators that have been receiving emails for something that they really hope for Rhode Island. So I think like there's an email going out saying, please, for the sake of Rhode Islanders, ban assault rifles. And I'm like, I'm all for you. I totally agree. But make sure that you're being careful about the text that you send too, because I think they meant Vermont there. So, you know, it's all in the details, but I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to me, and I hope something I said was helpful. And I know it was a jumble of words there, but I totally encourage you to reach out to me if you have questions or just want to talk through an idea. And I am here for you.
Thank you so much, Representative Cole. And I will just say that it is so great to collaborate with her, both in the State House and out in the wild. She is so active all over. I don't know how you do it. But if you are a constituent of Representative Cole, then you already know that. So we are actually doing great on time. We are right on time. So I'm just going to wrap us up with a few final thoughts, and I will let you all get back to the rest of your day. So I just would love to touch on a few upcoming events and actions. I will again be sending out a follow-up email to everyone on this call. And first, that will be about a special phone banking opportunity with the Maine conservation voters. Now, while we know that Vermont's federal delegation is pretty solid on a lot of things, and that is also the case when it comes to Trump's anti-climate reconciliation bill, we certainly cannot say the same about Senator Susan Collins, who represents a key swing vote in Maine. So please stay tuned for more information about that, on how we can help some of our New England siblings, if you will. And if you're not able to make that phone bank, or you want to get even more involved, you can join the No Dirty Budget call that's happening on that same day at 8 p.m. So Fossil Free Media will talk about how to plug in and apply pressure on key members of Congress to oppose attacks on clean energy, climate, and more. Now, I know you've heard a lot about No King's Day already, but just as one final reminder, please, please, please join us on Saturday, June 14th. There will be many efforts happening around the state. I will personally be at the Burlington waterfront effort, so hope to see you there. You can also join us at the VPIRG office for a pre-rally art build. So essentially, we will be providing all of the materials that you need to make signs, posters, or other kinds of art for that rally. Details will be included in the follow-up email as well. And, oh, sorry about that. That's what we have for you today. So thank you so much for joining us. A huge shout out to our guest speakers for bringing this training to life. I sincerely hope that it was helpful to you in some way. And please keep an eye out for more information on how to stay involved with all of us. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope to see you all again very soon. Thank you so much, and take care.